Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie.
All right, this is it. This is the final show before Cheltenham happens, and I'm delighted to say we've got about as good a guest list as we could possibly have. We've got Barry Geraghty with us, and of course we've got Johnny Ward, but it's all about you really today, Barry, to be honest. How are you getting on?
I'm good, yeah, thanks. How are you?
Good. I want to ask you about the anticipation that you would have felt as a jockey at this period where there's nothing you can do, there's nothing really you can except stay fit to make sure that you're actually going to be there when the first race goes to post. Was this a nervous time? Was it an exciting time? Was it anything? Were you trying to take your mind off it? How did you prepare for these last few bits before the actual proper action starts?
Yeah, so I would have always just treated Cheltenham in the build-up as if it was months away, and even on the weekend as if it's weeks away, until you get through your last ride on Sunday. Then, right, you're booked for Cheltenham at that stage, but not until then. You're not guaranteed, so you can't really commit your mind to it entirely. You'll be plotting and planning all the races, but you'll be treating it as if it's weeks away, as I say.
Was that like a superstition so you wouldn't get injured, or was it actually the only way you could stop yourself from getting too excited about it?
That was my way of approaching it, and then just not to buy into the hype and all the razzmatazz and everything, and back in the day of Moscow Flyer and papers and interviews and whatnot. So rather than get sucked into that, and a distraction really, so just block it out as if I'd always treat it as if, February time, Cheltenham's months away.
Right.
And as I say, the week before, until you get through that weekend, you're not there, and your horse isn't really there either. So it's just treat it as if it's in the distance.
So you kind of just lie to yourself a little bit.
Yeah, but that's something that I think an art I managed was blocking stuff out. So you block out pressure, you block out occasion, you block these things out because they can affect your judgment. And that was only my way of dealing with it. And I suppose pressure didn't affect me much for that reason, because I just had that sense of blocking it out and go into my own mind and do my own thing. But that's probably helped by the people you're riding for, who are not. So if you say Jesse Harrington or Nicky Henderson, JP McManus, those people wouldn't put you under more pressure than you already are. So you're the one who's putting yourself under the most pressure.
Yeah.
And when you don't have external pressure on top of that, you can deal with that in your own way. The external stuff, if you have a difficult owner, difficult trainer, then you have a battle on your hands then. Did
you get better at that as your career went on, or was that something that you were kind of good at from 17 to 20 anyway?
I think it was probably something that I was good at. Just it happened that way. But it definitely, Jessie was brilliant for that, because when I got unseated off Moscow Flyer in 2004, she just said, "This silly old fool." Never once did she say to me, "What were you doing? What were you thinking?" And she could have, as anyone could have. Her champion is on the floor, and race that was, I won't say there for the taking, but yeah, he had every chance of winning it, but she'd never question any day. And it leaves the jockey in a more secure position in their own mind, because they're not second guessing themselves, anything they're doing. If you have a clear mind, you're clear in your plan, you know what you're doing, you have the confidence to change attack at any stage during the race to what you feel is best, because you come back in, you're not facing the firing squad.
It's mad how that kind of that it's not comfort, but it's you feel like you're actually being given the freedom to express yourself, as opposed to second guessing what's going to happen. Well, exactly. It's like asking Ronaldo or Messi, stay in the corner or stay wide or stay wherever. Instead, just you wouldn't give them any instructions. It's what Leicester said years ago: a good jockey doesn't need instructions, and a bad one couldn't carry them out anyway. So, you have to trust your rider. But when you're riding for someone like that, and you're looking around the weigh room and you're seeing the fella or seeing the girl who's riding for someone who's got them under pressure, you can see it in their face, you see it in their body language, you can read it, and that they're in a shaky place, and decisions just won't come easy, and definitely answers won't come easy. And 9 times out of 10, when you're under pressure like that, you'll make the wrong choice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One last thing on the build up, like trying to block it out is all well and good, but there's countless and endless requests coming in to come to Cheltenham previews. Did you never do them when you were in your pomp? Was it only later on that you started to do them, or did you do them all the time and just still kind of going, it's funny they're talking about this race which is 6 months away?
Yeah, a bit like that. No, I always done a few, 3 or 4, tried to keep them local. So I always did. I'm heading out to the Hotel Manila to do one tonight, which I haven't done in a good few years. But no, I always did a few, and found them. You would pick up little nuggets of information from some of the good judges. You'd get a read on a race or a read on a horse, and you'd be thinking, oh yeah, I can see how that is, and you can get a little bit of information as a rider. But yeah, you'd still treat it as if this is weeks away. It's not. Cheltenham isn't there until you're in Cheltenham, really.
Yeah. Okay, that is interesting. I didn't realise that there was at least some value exchange where you are going and getting some information from somebody who you might think it's not just endless punters asking you questions and trying to put their pressure on your back as well. So just a reminder, this is Friday Night Racing and Off the Ball, brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie or follow the Twitter account at HRI Racing, and the hashtag is every racing moment. Johnny, how are you? What are you looking forward to most?
It's going to be a great week, Ger. I think the first 2 races, Barry will be very interested in Constitution Hill. The horse he knows quite well. The first 2 races, Britain has like fairly strong favourites in them in terms of, and that's an anomaly in terms of the British depth at the moment. 23 Irish winners last year. So I think the roar for the Supreme is going to be special as well, because Cheltenham without the crowds, it was like football, it just wasn't the same. And a lot of horses, one of the aspects of the whole challenge there is that you have to deal with the pressure and the hysteria of the parade ring and the crowds, the roar and all that. You have to deal with that. That wasn't the case last year, so that kind of took that out of the equation for a lot of horses that might be highly strung. And it's interesting. And Barry mentions go down to the Hotel Manila. I spoke to John Allen this week, and between himself and Pat Doyle, it's amazing the horses that have gone through their hands that are like, John Allen's obviously had the 2 Manila Times, and obviously Manila Indo winning the 2 big races last year. Pat Doyle has had Appreciated, St James's Gate, Bob Ollinger, a steering for Lounge, and it's you see the trainer of the horse, but the story behind each horse is quite different as well. And John Allen is going to get some kick out of it as well, and I'd say he'll be in great form tonight for Barry's preview, because all these Manila horses are kind of putting the hotel on the map and all that. But it's going to be a great week. I think in terms of where British racing is going forward, I think it'll be a pretty seminal week as well, because if it's another hiding for the British, I think jumps racing there really, really needs to look where it's going.
Well, let's actually get Barry Geraghty's thoughts on this, because it's a topic that we've been talking about a good bit over the last year. Johnny's convinced that Ireland are going to continuously pulverise British racing, and in the long run this is bad for British racing. And I'm kind of convinced that sport is cyclical and they'll get their house in order, and we should just enjoy being the superior force in this for a little while. What do you think, Barry? He's frozen. The line is down. That was a fair summation of your viewpoint, was it, Johnny?
Well, actually, just to say that it's not only not good for British racing, which is obviously self-explanatory, but I don't think it's good for Irish racing either. And just looking at the cards today, every day I go on the Racing Post now, Ger, and the field sizes in Britain in jumps racing and flat racing is absolutely alarming. And it's funny that prize money is generally blamed, but you have a really, really poor Mayor's Handicap hurdle at Newcastle today. $6,000 prize money, which is actually good for the quality of race. 3 winners, and the race before it, 2 runners. And every single day I find this, and I think the numbers in jumps racing in Britain just aren't what they were. And it's funny to think back to the days of Moscow Flyer, when an Irish winner inevitably precipitated the tricolour being draped around the shoulders, whereas now it's almost triumphalism after last year. So I don't know. I think obviously the good horses are staying here. Barry's been on the record talking about this as well, that effectively the good horses at a very young age are staying in Ireland. But I think another 23-5 give or take, I don't think that's good for anyone. In the long run though, we'll see if that persists. We'll just try and re-establish the line with Barry there. If anybody wants to leave a comment in the YouTube stream, by the way, feel free to do so, and we'll put those to Barry. And we're going to talk about the Champion Hurdle, the Champion Chase, the Stayers Hurdle, the Gold Cup, the Supreme Novices and the Champion Bumper. And we'll also get the thoughts on the Galloping des Champs versus Bob Ollinger on Thursday as well. So if anybody has anything that they want to opine on,
feel free to jump on the YouTube stream there, or you can tweet us at Off the Ball as well. We've re-established our line to Barry there. Barry, we were just talking about the Ireland versus England thing. Is it cyclical, or has the tide turned to the point where it's actually going to be difficult for England to get back and take the lead against Ireland in the overall standings?
Yeah, so like you've 28 races and 23-5 last year. I do think there's a chance that could go to maybe 20 versus 8, obviously in Ireland's favour. But we will see a tide turn out in a couple of years' time. The English are starting to up their game on their spending. And for me, that's what it boils down to, is sourcing talent and, spending the money that's needed to buy these top class horses. So, and you saw that with both Pied Piper and Vaboon being two good examples of quality horses, well found and money well spent. So, the English trainers just have to up their game on that, because they have the quality. Paul Nicholls, Nicky Henderson, Philip Hobbs, John Joe Neal, Harry Fry, Dan Skelton, Ben Pauling, all these fellas are proven Cheltenham winners. So it's they haven't lost the ability to train, but they just need to get the firepower. And I think, give it a couple of years, I'd say we'll be back to parity again. Yeah,
that's what I think too, Johnny. Is that not just the way the sport goes, that there's a gap there, obviously, and there will be an opportunity for some good horses to win big races in England over the next couple of years, and that will bring more investment. They'll come looking for the best young horses in Ireland. They'll take some of them, and that's where the parity will come from.
I don't see it. Like Barry's point there that's the crucial point. It's about like the same as, I know PSG were beaten by Real, but effectively, the team with the best wages generally wins the league, the best wage bill. But I think there has been a lot of factors influencing British racing in a negative sense in recent years. The animal rights stuff, I think a lot of people aren't maybe as into horse racing. Jumps racing itself, just as I mentioned when Barry was gone there, the field sizes are massively, massively down. Prize money is a serious problem. Maybe I don't think it's a lack of quality of the trainers, but essentially Ireland's economic kind of fortunes of the Celtic Tiger and so forth. I think if we look back on it, two things happened here in terms of sport. A lot of people came over from Ireland, from places like Nigeria, had kids, and now they're playing exceptionally well for Ireland. On the racing front, basically the money in this country kept horses here. And even when we spoke a lot about O'Leary's gone out of the game, Michael O'Leary and Eddie O'Leary, that hasn't had any effect at all in terms of Irish dominance. And I spoke to Ollie Murphy about this last year. It's very, very hard to get an English owner to spend 300 grand on a 4-year-old horse. And that horse, when he's won his point to point, which is effectively where most of the good horses are coming from now, they're already sold and they're staying in Ireland. They're in that shop window, and I don't really see it changing anytime soon, Gerard, to be honest. Okay,
let's get into the actual races then. Johnny wanted to ask you about Constitution Hill. You've got a relationship there going back. What do you expect from Constitution Hill and the Supreme Novices then, Barry?
Well, I'd be very hopeful of a big run. It's a quality race and there's great depth to it. But he's an exciting horse. He was very exciting here when we had him. So we bought him as a foal, myself and Warren Ewing. I had him here at home for 3 years. Even the 3 of our kids all had to sit on him at some stage. He was so laid back and quiet, which is unusual for a 3-year-old thoroughbred. But they had to go. And probably for the reason that we were hoping this fella could be special, because he had a nice pedigree. Physically, he's a good individual. So you're hoping he could be something good. But you wouldn't have dreamt maybe he'd be Supreme Novice hurdle favourite on the back of 2 runs. But he's been very good to date, visually very impressive, but the clock backs it up as well. He hasn't had to beat a superstar as such, but as I said, the times of his races are very good in comparison to anything else on that day, horses with experience. So he's shaping up well. He's a winner in Sandown, which is a stiff track. That ticks the box as regards Cheltenham getting up the hill. So he's a lovely laid-back attitude, which is going to suit the occasion, but it's a quality race, as we said. We're waiting to see what Willie's going to do. He has committed Kilcrut, but I suppose Dysart Dynamo and Sir Gerhard are the two then. Which of those are going to go here? John Bonn is there as well, has to have a big chance, stays really well, but Mighty Potter's 3 Stripes Life, there's great strength and depth, to say, in the race. So it'll be no walk in the park, but if I was a jockey, I'd be very happy to be riding him. I wouldn't be in a rush to stop him.
Right, okay, that is interesting. And the bit, even just the reference to the timing, because it's hard sometimes to know exactly how important or which bits of the form lines you're looking for to just establish. So the win on Sandown, the times is obviously something that you would put a lot of store in.
Well, it backs it up. I'm no expert on times, but when you hear the time form judges and they're talking sectionals And, you know, his time from the second last of the line versus times earlier in the day, his times to certain parts of the race, you know, for a horse with so little experience to clock the times, they compare it to Sir Gerhard's Grade 1. They put him on a similar level. So Sir Gerhard, he would have worked hard for that Grade 1 the last day. But Constitution Hill clocked a similar time on their comparisons, and he did it comfortably. So that's not saying he'll beat Sir Gerhard comfortably, but it's a good reflection that it's not just, we're not just being tricked by a visual here. The clock backs it up.
Constitution Hill beat a horse rated 125 the last day who wasn't mapped since, and Mr. Glass was third. He was well beaten since. So it's it is hard to know, Barry, isn't it? Because like we just don't have any comparison, and I'm intrigued by John Bon. Like I think he's almost been a little bit forgotten in the whole thing.
He is, yeah. No, and he was workmanlike in Haydock, but Haydock's a sharp track. And just going back to the horse that was second to Constitution and last in Jetwal, he was tailed off in the Betfair Newbury. So that's not a reflection. You can't say that was anywhere near close to his form. And the horse that was fourth that day has gone on and won really well since. The horse that was second to Might Eye in Sandown first time out was highly thought of. So there is, it's not strong form, but they're lively enough. And as I say, the clock. So I know from his work, from what he'd done before he went, and I know what he's thought of in Seven Barrels. So he's definitely, he's in the shake-up in what's a very strong race, I think.
I think there as well, like Barry and Sam Ewing's dad bought this horse to foal for 17.5 grand, and there are countless stories like this where there's a trainer and a jockey and an owner, but there are so many individuals who've been involved in all these horses throughout the years. And if you had that mapped on the TV per horse, you'd have like all these personalities who are cheering on even though they don't have an involvement anymore. And you know, I imagine, Barry, if you bought a foal at that price, we obviously sold on, but for him to win the Supreme, that'd be very satisfying.
Oh, completely. And we were lucky enough with Bobsworth years ago. Myself and my brother bought him as a foal. Nicky Henderson bought him off us, and he went on, and I brought him 3 winners at the Cheltenham Festival and finishing off at the Gold Cup. So it's brilliant when it works out, and that was fairy tale stuff. So we're hoping for more fairy tale with Constitution Hill.
What do you see in a foal? Because like every parent loves his or her baby and like thinks it's beautiful. Like, but I don't know. Like a foal, I mean, anyone who, you know, likes the beauty of animals, foals are stunning to look at. But like obviously you just see this precious little individual. Like what puts you to say, yeah, I like this foal?
Well, physically, Constitution Hill was really impressive. Good sire, Blue Brazil, also the sire Blue Lord, and lots more. His dam was by King's Theatre, who's a great sire of dams. He had a nice pedigree, just a quality individual. He'd strength, he'd scope, he'd a good walk, good movement. A lot to like about him. I thought when we left the sales that day, we got a good bit of value in him. And thankfully, he just kept progressing and improving physically. So he was always growing into the horse you'd hoped he was going to be. And you dream that he's going to be a champion, but those dreams, that they don't come off that often. So it's great so far that this one's worked.
Let's talk about Honeysuckle then in the Champion Hurdle. There's some animation around the possibility that Appreciate It might be able to turn Honeysuckle over on the day. I know the Saturday panel tomorrow, John Duggan is going to have a discussion about this, and there's some shout that perhaps for the first time we might see Honeysuckle beaten. Surely not. I mean, it's going to break the hearts of a lot of the Irish racing public if she does get beaten. But can Appreciate It do it, Barry?
I think there's a chance he can. If you were to look at the race in betting terms, there's only one horse to be on. Obviously, Honeysuckle is so short. She's a very good mare, and she's done well all season. She hasn't been as impressive. But Rachel went for home early in Leopardstown last time. And when she had a race in the bag, she did the right thing by easing up, let her pop the last, get across it. And Honeysuckle was probably slow to pick up a second time at the back. She's gone a bit laid back, a bit switched off. She's not going to murder herself in that situation. So I thought it was a good performance. That level of form has her where she was last year. But I think Appreciate It is the strongest candidate she's met to date, or will meet. So he won the Supreme last year. The form of that is very questionable, but he was 24 lengths clear of the second. The time was 2 seconds slower than the Champion Hurdle that day, which was Honeysuckle, obviously. And the ground between the Supreme and the Champion Hurdle, it would have dried a good bit as well. So these things, you know, that leaves the gap on the clock very close. Now you can't take that literally, as we mentioned earlier on, but it's a reflection of where he is as a novice. There is a chance of improvement in him. I know he's had a we haven't seen him out all season. But Willie's very happy with his prep. He's very happy that he didn't have a run into him. He doesn't have to worry about coming back, having had a tougher race than ideal last time. And he doesn't have to worry about the bounce factor. So you will know he'll have got the work into him. He had a racecourse gallop. They know how to get one fit on first time. They did it with Quevega for years. So I just think his value to oppose her. She is the one to beat. If you were a jockey, she's the one you'd want to be on. But I wouldn't be shocked to see Appreciated turn her over.
All right, Johnny, what do you think here?
Similar enough to what Barry says. Honeysuckle's a stranger. Like, I thought I couldn't get over the price she was here last year. She was sent off 11 to 10. But every time if you confound her, she just wins. I mean, her Leopardstown performance in the sense of Honeysuckle performances wasn't the best. As Barry says, she popped the last. She beat Zana here, who wouldn't be mapped in this race as much as he's going to run in it. And Appreciated. It's funny that he hasn't gone chasing because he's such a fine strapping horse. And the photos that are up on the Racing TV Instagram page, David Casey schooling him. He's so big and beautiful big horse. He's a bit of a blank canvas, and I'd have to say, if I were having a bet in the race, it'd be him because he was explosive in the race last year. He's won all his hurdle starts. He shouldn't win on the ratings, but he has a turn of foot. I think he's going to track Rachel Blackmore. I think Paul Townend will try to do her for pace jump the last. I think it'll be close. I actually, the more I looked at I looked at the times that Barry was talking about today as well, and he could have done that in a lot faster time last year because he was nowhere near extended. So yeah, I think it could be closer than the betting suggests here, and I hope it is, for all that. I guess we don't want to see Honeysuckle beaten either.
It's going to be one of the races of the championship if Appreciated actually puts it up to Honeysuckle. I mentioned Epatante there. You've had success in Epatante in the past. What kind of a horse is Epatante?
Yeah, so she was third in the race last year, maybe a little unlucky not to be second. She did the clearest passage through the race. I think her form was better this season. She had a little bit of back trouble. She was workmanlike when she dead heated in Newcastle, but was really impressive for me at Kempton at Christmas. She ran keen. Her times to the middle part of the race were very fast. So I think she over-raced to the middle part of the race, which left her finish a bit weaker. So she will perform better than last season, but whether that's enough to beat the top two, I'm not certain. But for me, she'd be the one to fill the placings.
Okay, all right. So that might be a nice each-way bet at this stage. Around about 10 to 1 is the price on that one. So let's move on to the Champion Chase on day two. I mean, we were looking back at, before we came on, Barry, at Moscow Flyers' time across the various years at Cheltenham and trying to pick. Johnny talks about favourite children. How do you pick a favourite Moscow Flyer memory? What moment of Moscow Flyers stands out for you when you look back?
Oh, there's too many, I suppose. Winning your first race in Cheltenham. So my first win I had in Cheltenham at the festival was on Moscow in the Arkle, 2002, 20 years ago. To get that first winner, to get the score on the board, that is so important. So that was an amazing day. And then I had my first championship win was the following year in the Champion Chase. Probably the moment I dread the most in Cheltenham was getting the fall off in 2004. But his performance on reflection in 2005, having won that vintage Tingle Creek when he beat Azerty up in Wild Chief, but he completely annihilated him in that Champion Chase in 2005. And I felt at the time everything must have underperformed. But on reflection, I wonder was the other way around. Was he just so superior to everything on the day? I know Azerty missed the water jump. You could say he underperformed, but he dismissed Wild Chief, where he had to work to some level in the Tingle Creek to beat him. So that was probably him at his best. So that is the moment of an easy Champion Chase.
That's so the progression over the period of time, but it's interesting. Like unprompted earlier on, before we even brought this up, you were talking about being on the floor and the response afterwards from the trainer and that little moment as well. It's funny how it's like 3 amazing successes and still there's just something in you that goes, there was that other thing that happened there as well.
The one that got away.
Yeah.
I always remember the one that got away. I rode 4 winners in Ascot one Saturday, and Sprinter wasn't the bumper. Monis Garden was the Ascot Chase. I can't name the other 2, but I remember the 5th one of Nicky's that won that day, and I was on the other one. I was an horse called Lust for Life was his name, and Ruby won. I can't remember his name now, but I used to remember it. Yeah, so that was the one that got away. So you usually remember the one that got away, but that's the competitive edge, I think. And
the first win at Cheltenham, how many years? So you were still obviously in your early 20s at that stage. How many years had you been going over and not winning?
So I was there in 98, 99, 2000. No, sorry, 99, 2000. There was no 2001, wasn't that right? Yeah,
that's right,
with foot and mouth. So 2002, yeah. So my third year.
So it's not bad. I mean, a lot of people.
Oh no, it's great. Yeah,
a lot of people were pretty happy.
I was just fortunate to have a horse of that quality at that stage of my career. And as I said, Jesse, to have someone to put the faith in a 22-year-old who's after had him on the floor as well. That's now I can't say I'm taking the blame for that, but he'd fallen twice in that season. I rode him the first day he fell, and I was injured the second day he fell. So yeah, never any question with Jesse. You know, complete faith, probably blind faith, but it was faith nonetheless.
And as a young jockey and with a horse like that, where there would have been some expectation, did you feel any pressure around that? I know you said you didn't really tend to feel it that much, but maybe that's after you start winning and being successful, and look, I mean, I have experience now, so. But before you get your first winner, is there a bit more pressure actually?
No, I think that's the beauty of innocence, though. You don't have the scars to second guess things so much. And you see that in all sport. You see the young minor who joins a senior team and bang, bang, away they go. They just score from anywhere because they don't have the scars of disappointment and whatnot. So I'd say it's probably, the beauty of innocence in those early years. And then as you get experience, good experience comes bad experience as well. And you could second guess yourself. I can't say I ever felt pressure in the early days, probably through that innocence, but also through the support I was getting from the people I was riding for.
Yeah, in fairness, that support definitely shines through. My Racing Moment is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Share every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie or follow Horse Racing Ireland on social media. Let's talk then about the actual race itself. Johnny, what do you fancy here in the Champion Chase?
Amazing renewal of the race. Like when you think Envoy Lane is 20-1, he was 4-9 here last year when falling behind Chantry House, and to think he'd be turning up at Cheltenham 20-1, and then you bring in the likes of Novice Negra, who obviously is like he's going to be available at sort of 10-1, despite the fact that he went so well in the race last year, and it's hard to see either getting involved really. It's just that clash between Honor Jameen and Shishkin in the Tingle Creek I'm not sure I've enjoyed a race as much in years really. It's just hard to see left-handed how Honor Jameen will reverse that form, because Shishkin at times in the race didn't look all that happy. He still won, and Chacon Pursois is going to be ridden handier, despite the fact that there is that concern that he was beaten in the race last year. Interesting to see Nicky Henderson in the racing post. He used the word banker in the sense of, I don't make him a banker, or I don't make him the banker that other horses in this race were, because I think he's a bit of a banker. I don't know what Barry makes of it.
You're talking Shishkin, are you?
Yeah, well, obviously.
Sorry, Barry, go on.
Yeah, so the Clarence House in Ascot was a brilliant race, and I would agree with Johnny. I don't see any reason why an Orgamine can reverse with Shishkin. A bit like we spoke about Epatante earlier on, his pace through the middle part of the race probably going a bit strong because he is a keen going horse. He wants to go harder than Paul Townend ideally wants to go, I suppose, and that leaves him weaker in the finish and more vulnerable to a good stare like Shishkin. But Shishkin is very good around Cheltenham. Nicky tends to peak them for this meeting, as does Willie. But for me, I think Chacon Pursois might be a bigger danger to Shishkin than an Orgamine. An Orgamine has tried his case. I don't see how he can beat him. But Chacon Pursois, he didn't turn up in this race last year. He was beaten after halfway. You could see he wasn't travelling with the same zest, and he should be pulling at Paul Townend through the race, but he wasn't. So it was a laboured performance, and it was a lesser race. He disappointed in the Tingle Creek when he had a hamstring issue back in early December. But Willie mentioned after Leopardstown when he won the last day how he's left him a gallop short. So he's not working him as hard. He's keeping him a little bit fresher. And you will find that trip to Cheltenham last year on the back of more work, he underperformed, you gathered in for that reason. So he's leaving him fresher. Hopefully leaving him a gallop shot might just make the difference, because what he did in Punchestown after disappointing in Cheltenham when he beat Allo and Novice Negra, he beat them out of sight in the Punchestown Champion Chase. That's a high level of form. So he is a very good horse. So I would see him as possibly being the bigger threat to Shishkin than an Orgamine. But whether that's good enough, we'll only find out in the day. But there's possibly value in him versus an odds-on shot. Yeah,
it definitely sounds like there is some each-way value there as well. Okay, let's move on to day 3, and let's talk a little bit about Flooring Porter, because obviously a horse that again has captured the imagination of the public in a way. And so sometimes I look at races, the odds prices like this, and think, well, there's obviously rightly support for the horse, but is the price a little bit short because the horse has become something of a celebrity over the last 12 months? I don't know. I'm just very interested to hear, Barry, what your thoughts are on that, and if there might be other value in that race as well.
I think that he doesn't get the recognition he deserves. He won the Stairs last year as a 6-year-old, and he won it from the front. that's very hard to do, because obviously with age comes, physical strength and stamina. And to do that at 6, I thought was a massive performance. So there's potential for improvement. He ran a great race in Leopardstown at Christmas behind Classical Dream. When the two of them are a mile clear, that people question the start, and Classical Dream got a freebie. But I'm not fully convinced that if Paul was given the choice, he would like to have ridden him that way. I'd say if he was riding a Stalking race, would have suited him, because he's a Supreme Novice winner who should have the pace for Florian Porter. But Florian Porter didn't seem like as if Danny Mullins could get him out from behind Classical Dream, because he has this tendency to hang and jump left. But I think he's a worthy favourite because he hasn't blotted his copybook. But if you draw a line to Classical Dream's running Goran, for me, he just might have the edge. Champ would have underperformed in Cheltenham the last day behind Paisley Park, and he's alongside Lisnagar Oscar, who's been disappointing all season. So I'm not fully sure that race is as strong as it might have looked initially. So Champ needs to improve a lot. I think it's a better race than last year, but for me it'd be Classical Dream just to edge it over Florian Porter.
Okay, Johnny, for you?
It's a really, really deep renewal of the race, and so many of my chances. I mean, the performance of Paisley Park the last day at Cheltenham, when he basically, Ruby was saying he should have been pulled up, and it looked like almost an animal rights issue. How are you riding this horse in Coleman? And he was riding because he thought he had a chance, and he ended up winning. Obviously, Champ was disappointing that day. Florian Porter and Classical Dream, that clash at Leopardstown is very interesting, because Classical Dream effectively got 6 lengths at the start, and Florian Porter, I think he'll be in great nick to win this race. Whether he'll be good enough or not, we'll see. I think there's a bit more depth maybe to the race than there was last year, but it's an absolute cracker. Florian Port for me, but it'd be very tentative.
Okay, all right, so it should be good, and that's, I guess, the reason why we have markets, is because there's a slight difference of opinion for stuff like this. Let's go to the Gold Cup then, and talk about Friday, around about 3:30. This time next week we'll know just about, or it'll be coming up to the end of the race anyway. So Johnny, set the table for us here. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a strange race. Like, it's kind of, to think that Galvin is going to possibly go off favourite as an 8-year-old who last year was obviously running in the 4-miler. It's hard to believe, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to say it's anything other than a kind of a good renewal of the race, because you have last year's first and second and third, Allaho and Manila Indo. You have Allaho then finishing behind. Aplutard finishing behind Galvin at Leopardstown, so he has to reverse that form, and Galvin absolutely loves the hill here. I think he's a great chance. The best British hope in the race, I would say, is probably Protectorat, who's come in a good bit in the betting, but it's really dominated by Irish horses here. I think interesting kind of riding arrangements as well. Robbie Power, who obviously Barry know very well, he's riding Manila Indo despite not having a major kind of relationship with the Bromhead Yard, and Robbie Power obviously rode Size and John to win this race in the past. Rachel will be riding Aplutard, who I think is a bit vulnerable. I know he's favourite, but I don't really see why he should beat Manila Indo, and I'd be worried about him reversing form with Galvin. Just finally, I did speak to Rachel Blackmore during the week, and she said the ride that she gave Aplutard at Leopardstown, she's very disappointed with the ride herself. So I think she fancies that she can reverse the form. But plenty of layers and a great jumping test this race. It's jumping at speed over a long trip, very, very bang, 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 and it's going to be a cracker.
Yeah, I think there's like nearly 10 horses, 16 to 1 and under. So the bookies obviously feel like it's a very strong field. But there's short prices for the Gold Cup for the top 3 in the betting as well. How do you, when you're looking at this race, Barry, what are you looking for to try and separate what you think might happen and the prices?
Yeah, it's a very competitive race. I'm curious to know where Johnny is hanging his hat, though.
Galvin.
Yeah. No, I think Galvin's a good call for horses' chance. He seems to have improved a good bit since last season. And it was a good performance in Leopardstown. I think he'd be better suited with Cheltenham, bigger test of stamina. The pace of the race from word go is going to be strong, and that hill as well. Then, so it's 3 1/4, but it's probably more like 3 1/2 or even more than that. So you need a horse who really stays. And I'd agree with Johnny. Aplutard, little bit question mark over him. We're still living on promise as regards at this level in a Gold Cup. He could be a little bit like Mike Bike versus Native River, arriving on the scene and just not getting past. So I think last year's win in Manila Indo, I didn't fancy him in the King George. I thought Kempton was just far too sharp for him, didn't have the natural pace. He's a proper stayer. He's an Albert Bartlett winner, and only touched off in the RSA, and he won the Gold Cup last year with a near prick. So he had a little bit left in the tank. A reproduction of that, it's Minellindo for me. I like Protector Rat. I think he's a smart horse, very keen in entry when he won last time, but still sought out well. So that was a good performance. I know Nicky's Sweet on Chantry House, he can get him back to some level of form that he was in last season. So he has an outside chance. But for me, Minellindo and probably the Danger Galvin.
If it wasn't for you, Barry, of course, Minellindo would be unbeaten at Cheltenham.
Well, we give Champ a little bit of credit too, Johnny.
Yeah, that was one of the all-time great finishes to a race. But I suppose in a way that race they kind of took each other on a bit, himself and Allaho, and you had a finishing kick. Whereas this is going to be very tactically interesting, Barry, I'd imagine, because if Galvin does get into a rhythm, it's hard to see Anthony staying up the hill better than him.
Well, Minellindo, I would see him. I think that they're two similar types and they're two proper stairs, which you need. They have enough pace.
How do you disrupt that then, Barry? If you're on something that isn't going to be able to match that, how do you disrupt that earlier in the race from a tactical perspective?
Well, you don't. So if Minellindo's handy, if Galvin's handy, Protector Rat needs to settle better, which I think he will with the pace they'll go. All you can do if you're on apple tired, you drop them in somewhere midfield, you creep along quietly, you work them into the race, you're 2 lengths down, jumping the third last, follow them into the straight, you're attacking between the last two, and then when push comes to shove, do you have what's needed in the locker? And that's all you can do on those horses. So it's the proper stairs, as you saw in the past, like Native River, up in the van all the way, handy, jumping, galloping, and just keep going. So those are the types that Minellindo and Galvin are. So they're the real, you ride them forward. You don't have to ride them aggressively, but you ride them in the first half of the race. But you'll find they'll be thrown on the coal from the top of the hill 4 out.
That point that you made earlier on about the crowds and the noise and all that kind of stuff, is that something that we need to factor in this year in a way that we wouldn't have as much in previous years, because it's going to be new for so many of these horses, and it's been so long since we've seen the full crowds at this festival? Are there some horses who just are actually going to blow their chances because of nervousness or inability to deal with the crowds? Are some races going to go off even faster earlier than they would have done in previous years?
Well, you have the potential for horses to get on edge, but generally you're talking novices, younger horses who haven't got the experience. But the older horses in the Gold Cup and that, I'd be highly unlikely if you see any of them getting up into too much of a sweat. So the younger horses, yeah. The crowd, yeah, it can affect some riders, especially in the Supreme. 2 mile races, they tend to go very hard up the straight, and then you turn away from the stands. The pace will generally drop on that little uphill climb a little bit, then they quicken again down the back. So that's where a rider really comes into play. And you saw it with Rachel last year, right place, right time. And it looks so simple and it sounds so simple, but it's just understanding the pace of the race. So if you're dropped in early, which she was, if you take Honeysuckle, for example, she was second or third last up the straight with Honeysuckle in the first half mile. And then as the pace changed, she crept into it. As it dropped, she crept in again. So she rode a beautiful race on Honeysuckle as a good example. You usually get it right when you ride the winner, but she was always in the right place, right time. Where if you're up in first 3 or 4 when they're going too hard early, that takes from your finish. So it's all about keeping a balance, and it's not easy, especially with the pressure, the expectation, the crowd, the whole buzz, the weeks of hype. It tests the rider.
Yeah, I'm sure it does, and it's a year of hype really. In the case of some of those super horses who were so good last year that we're kind of emotionally invested in now. So I did want to ask you about, we talked about this a little bit earlier, Galloping Deschamps and Bob Ollinger. Johnny, you think this has the potential to be the race of the week?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, as much as I and many people find it an absolute joke that they're talking about 5 days for Cheltenham when they've diluted so much as it is, this race, I think Galloping Deschamps should be running in the Brown Advisory, really. I think he's running the wrong race there. I think as much as he's taken on maybe one big rival, I think Bob Ollinger is going to beat him, but it's what a spectacle. Galloping Deschamps jumping has been incredibly brave, kind of enthusiastic, just what you like to see in a novice. Like when you see the way he jumped first time out at Leopardstown in a maiden chase at Christmas, that's why we get involved in this game. It's because the potential to see something like that, he absolutely loves it. Bob Ollinger has been a bit more workmanlike, but his engine is incredible, and what a race. It could be literally joint favourites, even money the pair. I'm with the Bromhead horse, but I know others will be with Willie's. Unbelievable race in store.
What do you expect to happen here, Barry?
I agree with Johnny. This is probably one of the clashes of the week. 2 potential superstars. What Bob Ollinger did last year, in the Ballymore when he destroyed good horses. Brave Man's Game is a dozen lengths behind him, and Paul Nicholls had his bubble burst that day. But Galloping the Champ, how he jumps. I think Willie has chosen the right race, because when he jumps and attacks his fences with that enthusiasm, if you try to make him go a gear slower over 3 mile, then he could do something stupid and he could pick up early and land in the middle of them. But at least when there's a little bit more pace on, it concentrates their mind a bit. They're not just as stupid, because they have to be more switched on and concentrate harder because it's happening quicker. So I think Willie has made the right choice. He has the pace. And for me, for what we've seen jumping to date, I'd have to just slightly side with Galloping the Champ.
All right, that's in the Turners on Thursday. We're going to let Barry go here, Johnny, unless there's anything specific else that you want to ask.
I suppose the bumper, Barry, finally, just again another unbelievable race. Like I even talked to Pat Doyle, who was involved in James's Gate, and he mentioned Redemption Day, who he also had. He actually had 2 in this bumper, and they're not even mapped in terms of the first 2 in the betting. This is going to be again an unbelievable race. Would you be a banker in terms of Facile Vega or a blowout?
Well, I'd be taking him on. I think he's a very good horse. But the bumper, you talk about horses we spoke about, Ger, as regards, the occasion getting the horses. So you have some horses go out in the bumper and they're completely relaxed, and some are on edge. So who knows? Facile Vega could be one of those on edge. He could underperform. He was jarred last year, so he found ground somewhere along the way a little bit too quick. He was a little bit sore, so Willie had to back off. That's a slight concern if the ground does dry, and especially on the downhill run into the straight. Will he let himself down? Will he extend fully? So American Mike is very smart. Form is very good. It's a bit like when you talk about Honeysuckle and you're talking prices and whatnot. I think there's more value in American Mike, but it's very hard to see outside of those 2 on the book so far.
I know you're still obviously involved in the game in loads of different ways, Barry. Is there a yard or a collection or a string or an owner or anything at the moment whose forces are in particularly good form? Do you think everything around here sounds good?
Yeah, no, most things sound good. I know people are questioning Nicky's horse's form, but I know from speaking to him, he's happy anyway, and he's getting the right vibes. Henry's horses have shown a return to form without saying they're blitzing. So, I'm not fully convinced he's going to have the Cheltenham he had last year, which would be hard to match anyway. Willie probably has the strength and quality of anyone. I think in the Grade 1s, he's best represented. Gordon has great numbers as well. Good chances in the Grade 1s. Probably he's best represented in the handicaps, I'd imagine. So it's on different levels, everyone seems to have a little bit. But it's Willie who probably has the Grade 1 firepower. Are
there any of JP's horses that we should be looking out for that are slightly underexposed at the moment?
Yeah, Dinah Blue was very good in Clonmel when she won her maiden. She hasn't been seen since. So she goes in the Mayor's Novice. Her time, everything on that day was really good. So she's smart. Ellie May is probably another good chance in the Mayor's Chase. And as I mentioned, Epitant, she should go well. And hopefully Chantry House can outrun his odds. All right.
I'm sure you're looking forward to it. Do you feel a sense of freedom? Crowds are going to be there. You don't have any real responsibilities to anything other than whatever work you're actually doing on the day itself?
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. And just as a spectator, like it's such a difference. But watching that Energamy Shishkin race from home as a spectator, and the nervous excitement that I had that day was, I'm looking forward to 4 days of that.
We had Colin Boyle on recently.
Just a final question, sorry Barry, just if Galvin were to win for Davy in light of the injuries he's had at the age he is, that's got to go down as one of the amazing sporting achievements. I know he was brilliant on him at Leopardstown, but like if you were to win the Gold Cup on him, I think it'd be astonishing.
Oh, completely. And Davy's done unbelievable to get back from what he did, to be off for 11 months and come back from the injury he had. The mental strength to do that. And then, he's proved himself, but he himself well proven before it happened. But, to see him on Conflated and so many horses and just vintage Russell is all you could say. Like, he's deadly, there's no doubt about it. So if he comes back and can win a Gold Cup, it's another layer. And that's what Cheltenham's all about. And it's not always the obvious ones. You saw the stories last season, the Hennessy mare winning the Coral Cup. There's so many underdogs that get a chance and get their moment. So there's so many layers to Cheltenham on the festival, and a lot to look forward to.
I was going to say, we had Colin Boyle on recently, the Mayo footballer, and he was just talking about sitting on his couch watching the league matches where it was absolutely howling. It was Baltic, it was a bit foggy, and he was like, I'm not missing this at all. But knowing full well that when the sun is out in the summertime and the ground is hard, he'd be like, oh, wouldn't mind being out there. Is there any part of you at all when the crowd is cheering on any of the days this week, thinking, I've won this race, I've won that race, oh, I could have been on that horse? Any part of you think will be like, I missed this?
No, honestly, not a bit. I'm 42 now. I retired when I was 40. You can't go on forever. So no, it's comfortable with me. And I was in Cheltenham back in January and trials day. I was there in November. I was there in October. So I got a good feel for it. And there was a great crowd in trials day. The atmosphere, the buzz. So no, I enjoyed it as a spectator. And you're in a different mind space now, having been gone from the hot seat for 2 years. So no, I'm in a much calmer, slower, more relaxed place.
Well, listen, we're glad you had the time to spend with us on the Friday before Cheltenham this year, Barry. Thanks a million for it, and enjoy. Cheers.
Cheers, Jared. Thanks, Johnny.
It's Barry Geraghty giving us his thoughts there. This is Friday Night Racing and Off the Ball, brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie or follow the Twitter account at HRI Racing. Back after this.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie. Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie.
Okay, as we've said, Cheltenham is upon us. It is time to review the performance of our Tote 10 to follow horses and make our substitutions ahead of the event. With 7 bonus races next week, making the right changes now could ensure victory in the overall competition. You can sub 2 of your 10 to follow stable horses between now and 11 o'clock on Tuesday on tote.ie, where you will also find the Cheltenham 10 to follow mini game, which is open to entries. I think we can have a look at the respective stables here and get a sense of what's going on. Yeah, so Danny Mullins has Honeysuckle, Allaho, Fernie Hollow, Sir Gerhard, Bob Ollinger, Flooring Porter, Clan des Obeaux, Manila Indo, Fiddler on the Roof and Chacun pour Soi. It's not bad. Okay.
What do I got?
I'll tell. We're doing me next. That's just the order. Honeysuckle, Galopin des Champs, Champ, Classical Dream, Chacun pour Soi, Envoy Hélène, Fiddler on the Roof, Manila Indo, On the Ropes, and Eclat de Rire. I know who's getting kicked out there anyway. All right, and you have in the lead, Johnny, Honeysuckle, A Plus Tard, Allaho, Shishkin, Fernie Hollow, Bob Ollinger, Classical Dream, Envoy Hélène, Flooring Porter and Saldier. That's not bad.
It's not bad, yeah. Some obviously that's happened quite at the season. The Envoy Hélène one, if he were to win the champion chase, and like he was this time last year, he was considered the next big thing. It just hasn't worked out.
So just on that, right? Because like we were talking about there, not really mentioning the possibility of that, but that's what happens at this festival, isn't it? It's like the horse that was away for a year, because National Hunt horses, they age in different ways. They have bursts of form. Like it's not a straight line in terms of progression and regular achievement. Frequently, horses that were the next big thing, not great for a while, come back and do begin to fulfil some of the potential.
Yeah, and it's kind of strange because like Henry de Bromhead, I got the impression that he didn't necessarily think his form, we'll say, when he won the Grade 1 the last year, he thought that was kind of in keeping with his form as a novice. And I think there's a challenge there for Henry because he's such a brilliant trainer, yet like he hasn't really worked out since he changed yards, and he doesn't seem to be the most straightforward horse in the world. Apparently at the race last year, and I backed him at like 1-2 or something. I couldn't see him being beaten. He fell at the second, but apparently he'd kind of boiled over before the start, and Jack Kennedy was worried about him in the race, so that'd be a concern again. But like he was disappointed then at Punchestown. I wasn't taken with him really, to be honest. At Leopardstown, I thought he didn't achieve that much, but he comes in sort of under the radar, and it wouldn't be amazing were he to like finish in the top 3 anyway. But like it's one of these races where there are, as Barry says, a lot of layers to it. He like this time last year, he was literally he's going to win everything that he ever raced in.
And like, it seemed like it was a good advice. And obviously some horses just never actually live up to it. But would you be terribly surprised if there was like a second coming of that?
Not really, because he was unbelievable in the Cheltenham bumper, and it was the way that they spoke about him in Gordon's. Like they weren't kind of hyping him up for no reason. Like they absolutely love this horse, and Gordon has had really good horses like Gold Cup winners and so on and so forth. And I don't know. I mean, you remember this time 12 months ago, the whole Gordon Elliott thing was unravelling, and the horses were moving on to different yards, and it's kind of like a kid who changed school sometimes. This is the theory as well, that like he was happier in one school and he wasn't quite as happy in the next. That's one theory, and maybe Henry de Bromhead reckons that he's done as good as he can with the horse as of yet. But it's just such an unbelievable champion chase. I hope they all turn up, because it's one of those races that, like you could basically, for the 4 days, this would be worth the entrance fee one day alone to see these horses in action. And Envoy Lane is that he is the forgotten horse, but maybe he'll become the cornerstone, the one that they rejected. All
right. Anything else you want to get off your chest about Cheltenham next week?
Don't get the coronavirus. Basically 4 or 5 days before it. So
that's why you're not in studio today.
It is. 2 years I battled hard and couldn't have been more cautious and all that. And finally,
sorry.
Finally,
that's just not true. It is one of science's great miracles that you did not get the coronavirus up to this point, I would have to say.
But I did that test this morning, and the second line was
taunting you.
It was pretty black, to be fair. So anyway, it is what it is. So try not to get the coronavirus, but all joking aside, do gamble responsibly. It can be a week where if everyone else is winning and you're not winning, it can get the better of you. And it's definitely 4 days, 28 races. If you're losing money and you're having bets in most races, a lot of people will chill out. It's a long year ahead, and don't lose the run of yourself, effectively.
Yeah, it's supposed to be crack.
Yeah, it's supposed to be crack. And I have to say, I've had, having a few pints in the pub during Cheltenham with friends and backing a few winners. To me, it's the best crack you can have, pretty much, in sport and context. It's unbelievable crack, and don't lose sight of that as well, that we're here for a good time, not a long time.
Yeah, and if any public happen to see you, that you're barred while you're...
Oh, yeah. Sorry, but you're supposed to be self-isolating. Oh, yeah. Thought about that.
Friday Night Racing and Off the Ball is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie or follow the Twitter account at HRI Racing. The hashtag is every racing moment. We'll be later next week, because obviously we'll be watching Gogglebox style to the Gold Cup on Friday in particular, and we'll see you next Friday at the later time, around about 5:30, hopefully talking to some Irish connections of the Gold Cup winner. Until then, go easy.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit HRI.ie.